Welcome to the Crypto and Blockchain Talk.
Hello.
Hey.
Guten Tag.
Aloha.
Hola. Shalom.
Hello.
Namaste.
Ni hao.
Privet.
Hello.
Salut. Yassas.
Salve.
Ciao.
Bonjour. Our podcast talks about the latest trends in the worlds of cryptocurrencies and the blockchain.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of Crypto and Blockchain Talk. And I am so excited because today with me, I have Thibault Schrepel. And Thibault has just written a book on blockchain and antitrust. But before we go any further, I would like to say hello to Thibault. Thibault, hello and welcome to Crypto and Blockchain Talk.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Very excited.
Oh, we are going to have some fun today. And for those of you out there who don't know who I am the host. My name is Aviva Õunap. So without any further ado, let's jump straight in. So in the first instance, Thibault, what is your background that enables you to write any book? Just because somebody writes a book, these days people automatically, they can have no background. They can have no education. And education doesn't really mean anything in many instances. Experience does count for a lot. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, which would make people understand that you are well placed to write a book called Blockchain and Antitrust?
Sure, I hope I am.
Oh, don't say that. You are.
And also you mentioned education, and that's something I'll be more than happy to discuss with you because it is indeed quite a challenge to teach about blockchain at the university and especially in the law school. So this brings me to my background. I'm a professor of law. I got a PhD in law in the field of antitrust. So this is for the one side of the book. And for the other side of the book, I started working on blockchain quite a few years ago just for the purpose of being able to say, I wrote a paper 4 years ago, so see everyone, I knew about it. So this was very, opportunistic behavior from the very beginning. And I thought, let me just write one article on the subject and then move on to something a bit different. I thought maybe quantum computing, it looks, quite cool as well. But unfortunately, blockchain became a kind of a brain virus, although I realized it's a word I shouldn't use probably anymore nowadays, but eventually I got stuck with the subject and published more papers on the subject of blockchain and antitrust. And eventually decided to write a book because it's not the only reason, but decided during the first lockdown here in the Netherlands that this was the right time for me to write a book and spend some time home and think about those issues a little bit. So again, I hope to be in a great position to write on the subject.
From what your background I understand is, you are absolutely in the right place. Do I also understand that you work for a couple of universities? Which universities do you actually work with?
Sure. So my main institution is the University of Amsterdam, where I do all of my teaching and most of my research activities. I also am a faculty affiliate at the Codex Center, which is part of Stanford University, where I work on computational law. So this is something a bit different, but that also relates to blockchain. And I teach at Sciences Po in Paris and Sorbonne in Paris, which is also, great students there, and also a way for me to go back to my country. As you can hear, probably I'm French, so I do need to go back to France sometimes. So this is a great opportunity for me to do so.
Okay, so you have written this book on blockchain and antitrust. So I thought the first thing we would do, because of course this podcast is very much in the vein of educating people, and I'm going to give the kind of Merriam-Webster textbook definition of antitrust, which is that antitrust laws are statutes developed by governments to protect consumers from predatory business practices and ensure fair competition. So there's obviously more than enough material to cover in the world of blockchain when it comes to antitrust. But can you give a better definition of what antitrust looks like in the blockchain world?
Sure. Again, not too sure it will be better, but what you've just said, the definition you've given us is actually very controversial for several reasons.
Ooh.
some people would say consumer was indeed about protecting consumers, but it doesn't make sense anymore to just talk about consumers. We are citizens, and therefore antitrust should move in this direction. Some people would disagree with that, but this is a big debate right now, especially in the United States. Also, the use of the word fair is controversial because what is fair for you might be unfair for me. So some people are saying we shouldn't care about what is fair, but, look at the world from a more objective angle. So going back to my definition, I would say antitrust is the laws regulating the relationships between companies. And so if one company collude with another company, let's say to agree on the price, this could be prohibited by antitrust laws. If another company is too powerful and abuses that power against other companies, this could also be prohibited by antitrust laws. So where I think it's interesting to look at that and all of those issues in the sphere of blockchain is that if you do not have the same intermediaries and potentially less intermediaries that you have in the centralized world, then the question becomes, do we really need antitrust, since indeed it is about, a company or several companies agreeing on purpose to do things, and those practices are generally decided by just a few persons. And if that is not possible within blockchain, especially public permissionless ones, then the question becomes, do we really need antitrust? And I'm here to argue that yes, we do. And in fact, I think it could help blockchain communities to be aware of that and use antitrust laws when they should. So this will be my definition of it.
Well, that's a pretty clear view on what exactly this is about. So there are a lot of directions I want to go with this. I mean, believe me, I have a lot of questions. But what I think I want to first do is talk about the first blockchain antitrust case, which no doubt you know everything about, the ins and outs of. Okay, what's the easiest way to explain this first antitrust case? Because there was a very first blockchain antitrust case. So can you tell us about what that's about and how that gives, what's the word I'm looking for, precedence in the world of antitrust cases in blockchain?
Of course. And here again, I think you could indeed argue that this is the very first one if what you mean by blockchain antitrust, or, looking at all of the issues, is looking at how antitrust could be violated within the blockchain ecosystem. But if you think that we should also care about, potential abuses outside the blockchain ecosystem, but impacting the blockchain ecosystem, then there is actually a case which was trialed before this one that I'm more than happy to discuss because it relates to the BitcoinTalk.org forum. And I think this is also very interesting. But coming back to the one you mentioned, in this situation, what you had is that you had indeed the Bitcoin ABC blockchain, which was a fork of the original one. And eventually two fraction of the community there disagreed on the size of the block for issues that you've been discussing. So no need for me to go back and explain why. And so it means that it's very interesting because it means no one's right. You could say we need blockchain with, 30 transactions per block or 100 or whatever you want. There are scalability issues, but also potentially computational power issues. So there is no right and wrong. They disagreed on the size of the block, and eventually one fraction of this Bitcoin ABC community decided to fork the blockchain and create another one with larger blocks. And the first one, the original one, then argued, well, what you've done is illegal. You are infringing antitrust law because basically you have colluded against us. And of course, if you fork a blockchain and if the fork is successful, what you end up doing is that you divide the value of the blockchain. And so they argued you have agreed to do something against the Bitcoin ABC blockchain. And because of your behavior, you have decreased the value of the Bitcoin ABC blockchain. And this is an infringement of the Sherman Act Section 1, which prohibits economic agents coming together and agreeing on doing stuff which are in infringement to antitrust here, reducing the value of the original blockchain. So this was indeed the first case within the blockchain ecosystem. It took quite some years for the court first to figure it out. You could see in the conclusions and in the hearings that there are lots of spelling mistakes, and you could see it's not so clear what is Bitcoin and what are the other blockchains. So this also says something very interesting. But eventually it's decided that it wasn't an infringement of antitrust law because they couldn't prove a collusion in the first place between the new Bitcoin ABC and and this was also at the core of the issue, some servers that they said was rented by the forked people for the purpose of showing that the fork was successful. And so because they couldn't prove collusion, the case was dropped out eventually. But nonetheless, I think it could have been a different outcome. And I was a bit worried, or should I say, very much worried about this case, because I thought, regardless of the issue and regardless of who's right and wrong, let us say that the court would say, well, you know what, you're right. This fork was anti-competitive. And as a matter of fact, all blockchain forks are anti-competitive because there are a bunch of people coming together and reducing the value of the original blockchain. So I could see the logic behind it. And this kind of decision would have basically prohibited forks on blockchain. And this would have been a big hurdle for the entire ecosystem. So it proves that legal rulings and our legal rules can have a major impact on the blockchain ecosystem. And we know that when we discuss regulation, and you've been discussing, all of those regulations, especially in the US, with a massive impact on the blockchain ecosystem. But we often forget that court decisions can also have a massive impact on the ecosystems. Luckily, the decision was great in the sense that it wasn't prohibiting forks, but the outcome could have been different. And it might be that tomorrow another case will come and will prohibit forks. So we need to be vigilant in the space. And here, discussing antitrust issues, in my view, we should be aware that blockchain could actually bring, increased welfare and improve the common good. And therefore, it might be good for us to try to preserve the technology while enforcing the law. So this is the subject of the book and something that I'm sure we will be discussing together today.
Absolutely. Oh my God, there's so much to say. But in the first instance, what I want to do is just make sure I got this right. So basically, when Bitcoin Cash was scheduled for their upgrade and the two camps were disagreeing on how the rules should go forward within the blockchain, and of course they forked into the Bitcoin ABC and Bitcoin SV, this in a way was questioned whether or not it was breaking antitrust rules because Bitcoin ABC had greater support and succeeded Bitcoin Cash in the forking. I am just a little confused, though, because I thought once in law, a case was settled because here, what the opinion was that there was no antitrust conspiracy, correct? So doesn't that set a precedent? Doesn't it mean that once this was decided on, and the law, they basically said, okay, forks do not break antitrust rules. Doesn't that mean it's essentially over? That's it. You can't revisit it, can you?
So kind of.
Gosh.
Yeah.
You see, this is why it's great to have you on, because I always thought that once a ruling was handed down, unless you're saying that if it goes to a higher court, they can overrule it, or maybe in a different country, because this took place in South Florida. Yeah. But I thought that once a ruling happened, that it was pretty much set in stone.
So you're right. But it means that you would need then to encounter kind of the same facts and to be in the same situation to be able to, say, well, this was already decided, therefore, please go away. But here, what was interesting is that it was alleged that one of the two camps actually, as I said, rented some servers to put more computational power in their version of the blockchain, their forked version of the blockchain, as a way to show to all of the users, look, the fork is successful, and therefore you should actually join us. And in this case, it was decided that they couldn't prove any prior contact with this camp and the people renting the servers. But what you don't have in this decision is a proof of contact between them and then a decision saying, well, regardless of the contact, we do not care because forks are always pro-competitive because they create more competition, and therefore all forks will always be legal under antitrust rules. So again, because proof of contact couldn't be established because collusion wasn't established in the first place, you don't really have a decision saying that there is no infringement regarding Section 1 of the Sherman Act. I hope this is clear.
What is Section 1 of the Sherman Act?
So
What?
Section 1 is the one prohibiting collusion. So two economic entities coming together and agreeing on market behaviors. And here it could have been that one camp of that blockchain plus the people renting the servers, I think they were located in China, it would have been possible for them and for the court to say they were in touch. They on purpose decided to rent the servers and to put that computational power into the forked version of the blockchain just for the purpose of eliminating the first camp, and therefore this is an infringement of antitrust laws. But again, the court is not saying that. The court is saying there is no proof that they were actually in touch and that this was, a strategy from the very beginning. So should it be in the case tomorrow possible to prove a collusion between two economic entities? Then we do not know if the outcome will be that the fork is pro-competitive or anti-competitive. It depends on the case-by-case basis and their circumstances in tomorrow's cases.
You also alluded to another case which was important to the outcome of this particular case. What were you referring to?
You meant the very first one?
Yes.
So this one is a bit peculiar and a lot of fun, I have to say. I know it sounds weird to say that reading a case law is fun.
You're a lawyer. You think it's fun. I mean, well, of
Indeed.
course.
Indeed. So I'm totally biased, but it's a weird case. I think that's the right word. So this case is called Gallagher versus BitcoinTalk.org. Gallagher being a developer based in the United States. And basically, eventually, he was kicked out of the BitcoinTalk.org forum, which, as we know, is one of the main forums, where you meet people online and discuss blockchains and crypto issues. And therefore, he argued that being out of the forum prevented him from being able to design a great blockchain that could compete with Bitcoin because, he said, it wasn't possible for him, without access to the forum, to access to the best developers in the space. And he argued that this was also a violation of Section 1 of the Sherman Act, which once again relates to collusion between economic entities. I think this was a mistake because here it was just referring to one entity, and also, it was, of course, a long shot to be able to prove that you cannot design any blockchain if you don't have access to this particular forum. I think this is why also eventually the case was dropped out. And he forgot to pay the fees for the courts to be able to function. So for lots of reasons, the case was eventually dropped out. But again, it shows, and this is why this one is interesting in my view, that what you could do outside of, the layer one of a blockchain could also impact the entire ecosystem. Mm-hmm. So in this case, we're discussing a forum, but it might be that tomorrow we have a case where an exchange is abusing its dominant position. Should it be possible to be dominant, in this space? It could be that, and we have such a case as well, that you want to argue that if a big tech company is preventing you from advertising on their platform, then this is actually preventing you from, being successful as a blockchain community, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not only what's happening within and from a very technical matter that is important, but also everything that relates to the entire blockchain ecosystem.
There was a time that Facebook were touting their own crypto and they wouldn't allow any other crypto companies to advertise their cryptocurrencies. Did you know that? There was...
Yes.
So surely, didn't they break then some laws? Am I crazy? Isn't that under the same definition?
Yes, and YouTube was actually accused of doing the same. I mean, it's more than an accusation. They actually defended their behavior, right. and same for Facebook, saying, well, the reason why we do that is because we want to protect our consumers and users, and there are lots of scams in the blockchain ecosystem. Therefore, we're just going to prevent every type of advertisements. I'm not sure if this will hold before a court. It seems to be a bit too easy to say because there are, 1% of blockchain transactions which relate to criminal activities. Therefore, we're going to prevent any type of advertisements. You could say the same for many businesses and different types of products and services. But this was indeed the rationale behind this kind of behavior, which seems clear in some cases if indeed the company we are talking about is also on the side developing their own cryptocurrency. There you could clearly see how, this is a competitive strategy to prohibit others from advertising on their platform rather than just a way to protect consumers, which makes me think, just a parenthesis, a bit of a China strategy. When you do say, I'm going to prohibit mining Bitcoin, and then I'm also going to design my own cryptocurrency, you could also see, of course, at a much larger scale, how this is also a competitive strategy on the part of this country or on the part of the big tech companies such as we discussed.
My brain's exploding. I see collusion everywhere now. Wait a minute. Hold on. Would it also be if you have like two companies in the crypto space who are literally working together to kind of like to corner the market, or
Yes.
That's obviously against antitrust laws?
Correct. And I mean, yes.
Oh my freaking God. That's the whole blockchain. That's the whole crypto ecosystem. I mean, you've got to be joking.
Let me add a layer of complexity to all that, which is also why I find the subject to be fascinating.
Yeah.
You could say, in a sense, that a blockchain in itself is a bunch of collusions, right? Free economic agents coming together and agreeing to function according to the same rules, the same protocol. So in a sense, this is also something that I fear that you may have a court eventually saying, well, you know what, Bitcoin is just 21 million collusions altogether, where I hope no court will say that, is because to prohibit a collusion, you need to be able to prove that all of the economic agents can actually act as individual agents and independently on the market, which makes sense if you talk about Binance, let's say, and Coinbase, two different companies. If they agree on doing something, this could indeed infringe antitrust. But if you talk about just miners, I mean, you can't just be a miner on your own, right? You need to function to mine blockchain transactions. So for this reason, you are not an independent agent on the market prior to joining the actual blockchain where you are mining transactions. So I'm sorry for the layer of complexity, but yes, eventually if you are a free economic agent and you agree with another free economic agent, this could be a collusion. This is not always the case. If you can prove that this is good for consumers, then you could get a free pass. But if you cannot, then antitrust is coming back at you, and antitrust agencies are more and more concerned about all of those issues. So we're going to see more and more cases in the coming month for sure.
Are you for real? I mean, everywhere. You can see, I mean, you'd have to be a complete moron who can't read a graph. If you look, I'm not going to sit here and make allegations against anybody, but if any of our listeners have listened to any of our past podcasts, you definitely know where I'm going. All you have to look at is certain cryptocurrencies that perhaps the Attorney General for the state of New York, Letitia James, perhaps was looking at. That should give you a huge hint right there. But I mean, I see dead people. I see collusion. I mean, if that's the case, it's the FTC, right? It's the Federal Trade Commission who oversees that in the United States and only knows, I don't even know which body in Europe. They must be looking at everything going, yeah, we're going to shut this down. I mean, they must see so much trouble. I don't understand what we're even doing, really, even talking about this, because this should almost be like, so Thibault, why has crypto been shut down? I mean, that's almost what I feel like we're doing here. It's just like a really weird kind of place. I don't know. Am I going nuts on air? I don't know.
I mean, this is what being an antitrust lawyer and academic is. I mean, you see collusion everywhere. I go downstairs, I drink coffee, I go to one coffee shop, I go to another, that's the same price. And I'm like, fascinating. But this is where I come with some great news, finally. If you are just a small player on the market, first of all, it's really hard to prove that what you do harm consumers, and lots of consumers. And the scale also matter very much. So if we talk about, two miners agreeing on mining at the exact same time or on some sort of behavior, no worries there. I mean, the FTC will never come back at you and try to prohibit what you do. However, if we talk about big companies, then yes, then you should fear those antitrust agencies. There are two in the US, the FTC, as you mentioned, and the DOJ, the Antitrust Division. In Europe, the European Commission is playing that role. And pretty much every country on planet Earth has a antitrust agency on its own. I think it's more than 150 antitrust agencies. And I'm aware of a few agencies looking at those issues as we speak. So yes, there are collusions everywhere, which would make, for a great movie, I suppose.
Oh my God. Yeah, but it would be a very short one. But let me ask you this question, though. Let's talk about mining pools in DeFi. Isn't that also collusion, though? Because you have... Am I getting confused now?
So, it is confusing, and everyone's confused. You could look at it in two different ways. You could say, as you said, indeed, a mining pool is just a bunch of miners agreeing on, mining the same, agreeing on joining forces, basically, to increase their mining power. So you could say this is indeed a collusion between them, but you could also look at it differently, and I think antitrust agencies will actually do that, and I hope so, that a mining pool is just one economic entity at the end of the day, such as a company, right? If you talk about the big tech companies, every company on planet Earth is just a bunch of employees. Before joining the company, they were free to do anything they wanted to, but they have decided to join the same company, and therefore what they do cannot be a collusion because it means they are the same entity in the eyes of antitrust. And since you cannot collude with yourself, then you escape the rules against collusions. So should you do the same for mining pools, you could say, regardless of the number of miners, they are all part of the same mining pool, and therefore whatever they do within that pool is not an infringement to antitrust, or at least not to infringing anti-collusion. However, should two mining pools come together and agree on, mining a new version, a forked version of the blockchain with a new protocol, for instance, this could be an infringement of antitrust laws.
I'm thinking right now about three things. I'm thinking about layer 2 solutions, like you said. I'm thinking about 51% attacks. And then the third one, which is this one with GameStop and AMC and with the smooth-brained apes of Reddit who call themselves like Wall Street Bets or one of these other organizations who I think are absolutely amazing. But the whole point is that aren't all three of those things then technically colluding in some way to harm the underlying business and to deflect business from the original underlying chain and or business?
Short answer, you gave me 5 seconds, so I will take only one. Yes.
Oh, geez.
You may have a collusion behind it. Then what you need to prove is that it was actually decided as a strategy between those three entities to act in a certain way for the purpose of taking another economic agent out of the market, right? So you need to prove that this was intentional. However, it might be that it is really hard to prove, and therefore all you have is three economic entities behaving in the same way, but this could also be, totally random, which of course makes me smile a bit when we talk about this case. But this is the kind of evidence that you need to have. Luckily, antitrust agencies can actually go to companies' premises, size computers, read emails, and they often find a proof of a collusion, but this is not always the case. So it's hard to say in this particular case. I do not want to say this is I know for a fact this is a collusion. This should have been prohibited because it depends on the evidence that you have, if you actually get to the information.
Going back to my definition of antitrust laws, which are basically statutes developed to protect consumers from predatory business practices and ensure fair competition. I mean, that is such a broad blanket. Anyone can hide in that. During the course of crypto's life, there's been a lot of questionable business activity, all this other stuff we've been talking about with collusion and everything else. Well, mainly because there's no laws in this space. It is, as everyone keeps alluding to, since day one, it's been called the Wild West. So it's not like there hasn't been enough warning to governments around the world. Hey, listen, this is in development. From day dot, they have seen that this is in development and been watching all of these activities, as well as a lot of these whales entering the space. Some of them who are obviously silent and anonymous. Some which have much bigger mouths and a following, such as Elon Musk. So that goes to my next question, because I love the topic of Elon. I honestly think this guy is untouchable. Isn't it then, when he's shilling for whatever his latest crypto is, be it Doge or whatever, and then they have a member of their organization joining the Dogecoin Foundation after obviously helping allegedly lift the value of Dogecoin. Is that also under antitrust laws? Does that fall under antitrust regulation, or is that just stupidity in general? I mean, I don't even know what to say about that.
So short answer, no. Finally, some good news.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if that's good news.
But yes, maybe it's not actually.
Yeah.
A few things. First, you make the distinction between being stupid and infringing antitrust, when in fact, you could be stupid in infringing antitrust. I mean, if you look at past cases, you will see companies coming together and colluding, on the price of tobacco, for instance. And what you find is that in the agendas of the boss, they were actually writing meetings with my competitors today so we can collude, and raise prices artificially. So this sounds stupid to actually write this down on your agenda, and yet this is an infringement. So I do not want to give the impression that, antitrust is not about stupidity. It often is, actually. The second one, you said, and I very much agree with you, that governments were watching the space from the very beginning. And it seems that the opposite is also true. And if you go to the forum that we discussed, bitcointalk.org, and scan the very first messages, in 2009 and 10, you will see first Satoshi Nakamoto kind of talking about antitrust. I quote, he said, well, we should have a gentleman agreement to postpone the GPU harm race as long as we can for the good of the network. So which kind of seems to be an infringement of antitrust laws. But some people were answering and saying, yes, this could infringe antitrust, but let's not care about antitrust for now. We will see about it later. And in any case, they are pseudonymous, so there is nothing the government can do. And in any case, the blockchain is immutable. So even if they find out about something, there is nothing they can do. So it's very to me as a lawyer, I was fascinated to see that antitrust was at the very center of most discussions, even in the early days. And the last thing, to come back to your question, so the short answer is no. But here we enter another phase of antitrust, which is the second one, which relates to abuses of dominant positions, as we say in Europe, or as they say in the US, monopolization. So here it's not about a bunch of free economic agents coming together and agreeing on a certain practice, but it's about one economic agent being so powerful and so dominant that it becomes possible to abuse this power against other economic agents. So there is no coordination. It's pretty much the opposite, one against the others. So you could say that a company could actually abuse its market power to try to decrease the price of a crypto or to increase the price of another crypto, and this could infringe antitrust. But here, when we talk about Elon Musk, we are not talking about a company. We are talking about a very powerful influencer, and therefore it's really hard to capture Elon Musk as a economic agent. Of course, he is an economic agent, but when he is actually tweeting something, he's acting as an individual and a powerful, again, influencer, which means that here antitrust wouldn't apply, but you enter the realm of consumer protection and regulations against influencers. And I can tell you already that they are missing. We don't have much regulation in this space, which is why Elon Musk can do what he does, and he's not the only one, by the way. So the short answer is no antitrust violation in this particular case.
Right. Well, you're completely correct. Elon is far, 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 far from being the only shiller on the street. It's unfortunate because you have a lot of people who really don't even understand what the hell they're talking about, and they are shilling for whatever cryptocurrency is paying them or whatever the hell's going on. And we cover a lot of that also on this podcast. And of course, the latest one is Kim Kardashian, who the UK watchdog right now, I think, is going to go after her because she just wrote some insane posts about whatever cryptocurrency she was trying to shill to her 250 million fan base on it was either Instagram or Twitter, and I really could care less. But anyway, the whole point is, but it also goes to show you that people are sheep. You know, if they think that something looks good, they'll do it. And it also goes for people who are developing blockchain projects. If they think they'll get away with it, they'll do it. So Hester Pierce, who is one of the SEC commissioners, you know, she actually said for once something I agreed with. And that was, she thinks that they are too little too late. She thinks that they have acted very, very slowly on a lot of these regulations and with coming forth and taking action against many companies. And she's saying that this is why people now are getting shocked because they are the SEC, the CFTC, the FTC, they're going, and FINRA and all these organizations now are realizing that crypto is a thing and the impact it's actually having on the economy worldwide. But also, I think people need to take a step back because I think really, if anyone thinks that the U.S. government is going to say, okay, yeah, we're going to let our U.S. dollar, our fiat currency, or any U.S. controlled currency be dominated by any virtual currency. It doesn't matter if it's Bitcoin or Mitcoin. It doesn't bloody matter. The point is that the United States isn't going to let that. So we're going to see now, I think, this avalanche of regulation. It's going to impact, I think, the crypto community in ways that maybe they don't expect. I keep seeing articles which are very, very optimistic. These articles that are like, oh, you know, they're going to allow, you know, Bitcoin ETFs. They're going to do this. They're going, you know, all this optimistic stuff. I personally think that everyone's about to get their ass smacked really hard. And I mean so hard they're not going to sit for years. I personally think it's not going to be what people are expecting, what's going to come out of left field. And only because I'm reading so much. And I'm watching little bit by bit, the bricks are being put into. Do you see this as a lawyer or do you see what I'm seeing or do you see something different in terms of regulations coming in and how they're going to impact crypto as a whole?
So this time around, my brain is exploding. So
okay, take your time. Have a sip of coffee. Have a sip of coffee. You don't have to, have a think.
No, but I mean, yes, so this is precisely the reason why I got interested in those issues, because on the one hand you may think, well, too little, too late. We should have regulated the thing before, which as a lawyer I will call that ex ante action, right? Before the practices in place, we should actually shape the blockchain ecosystem in a certain way. But on the other hand, do we really want that? You know, often you will hear lawyers and government complaining that the technology goes too fast and the law is too slow. But sometimes I do wonder if we want the law to go way faster than the technology, because it could also mean that you will hamper the technology. And so in a sense, I kind of think that, you know, not regulating the space 5 years ago was a decision. And it seems that most governments wanted to protect the environment and were perfectly aware that they will actually hamper the development of blockchain ecosystem should they intervene at the time. And so, by the way, when they, parenthesis, in that regard, when they do say we are technologically neutral, I think this isn't true. Not regulating a space for the purpose of letting that ecosystems develop is actually not neutral. This is something in pro-ecosystem and in favor of it. But this was just a parenthesis. So all I want to say is that on the one hand, indeed ex ante regulation is a good idea, because then what do you do once businesses and practices are being implemented, especially when you compare that with immutability? This is a big issue. On the other end, we want to be very careful when it comes to ex ante regulation and intervention on the market. So this is a bit of the struggle for most governments. And that translates in many different ways. One way that you described is the political battle. To me, it appeared very clearly 2 years ago when Facebook announced at the time what they wanted to call Libra, now Diem, their cryptocurrency. Mm-hmm. And within a week, the European Commission announced investigations against this cryptocurrency because they thought this would infringe antitrust laws once again. And to the best of my knowledge, this is the first time the European Commission is going after a product or service or business model without the thing yet being available, which shows that, of course, it could be that there are infringements of antitrust laws regarding this cryptocurrency, but it also and certainly proves, in my view, that the European Commission fears GM becoming a major player in the space and then reducing, the value of euros or the relevance even of fiat currencies. So, and the same now can be said, as you said, for the US dollar versus any kind of cryptocurrency. I cannot think of a good reason why governments with a strong fiat currencies will actually foster the development of cryptocurrencies. It seems to play against their own interest, unless they can see that it will expose the country to foreign investments if they allow a cryptocurrency to flourish. This is why we have 12 countries now have said that they would not impose taxes on cryptocurrencies earnings. And it seems that more and more countries are joining that, because for those countries, the choice has been made to attract foreign investments instead of, trying to preserve a strong fiat currencies. But again, this is just a political battle. And for those reasons, I agree with you that regulation is coming after the players in the space. And sometime I do wish that we will also discuss how regulation could actually protect the space and be used by the players in the blockchain ecosystems instead of solely focusing on the problems. Because I think if we do that, we lose the big picture, which is very clear when it comes especially to antitrust, which is that blockchain ecosystems eliminate most intermediaries, which means that by definition, you eliminate most of the infringements to antitrust laws. And for that reason, there is a clear relationship and a friendship, I would say, between blockchain and antitrust enforcers. And this is why I argue in the book that we should potentially try to preserve blockchain, of course, regulate blockchain where it should be regulated, but do it in a way that would not simply destroy the entire technology. Otherwise, that's a lost opportunity to improve the common good, in my view.
Beautifully said. The first thing I want to say to that actually is all you have to do is look at, and this is in response, by the way, to what you said about countries with strong currencies, with strong fiat currencies. Just look at who has adopted Bitcoin as a legal tender. You have El Salvador and you have the Ukraine. The US dollar is very strong anyway in El Salvador. I can't really speak to the Ukraine, but they're in a constant state of political turmoil. So it's actually quite interesting on who is opening the door. Meanwhile, you have countries like Sweden, which I'm sure that you read in the news the other day, head of the Swedish central bank, who is basically saying that Bitcoin's price could completely collapse, and actually they likened crypto to trading stamps. And they are not big proponents of cryptocurrencies, it seems, as a country. And there are many other countries out there who have said no to cryptocurrencies in any way, shape, or form, unless it was their own central bank digital currency, which, of course, is the other thing I wanted to respond to with you, which is about centralization, because obviously CBDCs would be centralized. But if anyone believes that anything that would come out of Facebook would be fair and decentralized enough in a way that would not be totally in the interest of Facebook and or anyone within their alliance, they are fooling themselves. If people think that it would not have an impact in a global way on economies, they are fooling themselves. And that's the reason why the EU probably had to go change their underpants in a dark corner when they were like, oh my God, this is coming. And that's the reason why the US government as well hauled his ass in and raked him over the coals and basically said, you're out of your mind. And that's why then Facebook went and they hired an U.S. government official to try to help them push this stuff through. But going back to what Ted Cruz, a Republican senator from Texas, said the other day, he said nobody pretty much in the government understands anyway what crypto is. So getting any laws and regulations passed through is kind of hard when people don't understand the basic information about what blockchain or crypto is. So, there's so much more I want to discuss with you, and I would absolutely love to have you back.
Of course, that would be great. I mean, lots of things to be said about DM, indeed.
Okay, well, I'm really excited that you're going to be joining us again because you are just a fountain of knowledge. And I absolutely want you to know that your book, I think, is going to do amazingly well. I think everyone should be interested in looking at a copy of your book. I understand your book is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and, even online. And everyone should know that your name is Thibault Schrepel, Thibault Schrepel, Schrepel. And the book is Blockchain and Antitrust, the Decentralization Formula. Again, thank you for coming on, Thibault. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. And just one quick note, I've made sure that the book will be actually open access because, discussing blockchain, it has to be. So just feel free to download a copy online. And thank you very much for the discussion and also for all the positive energy that you bring to the space. It's very cool to be a skeptic, but it's much harder to be a realist. So I very much enjoyed the discussion and the podcast. So thank you very much.
Oh, I appreciate it. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in to today's episode. Please tell your friends and family to download this podcast on a myriad of podcasting platforms. We have the full range of podcasting platforms listed on Crypto and Blockchain Talk, which starts with iTunes, goes all the way through Podbean, Stitcher, Spotify, SoundCloud, all the way through to Verbal. There's over 70 different podcasting platforms, which now stream Crypto and Blockchain Talk. On top of that, we also stream this on our sister radio station, Crypto 24 Radio, which plays 24/7 around the world. On top of that, we love to hear from you, whether it's through our social media platforms of Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. It doesn't matter. We love to hear your positive comments, but we really prefer to hear from you in person. So please feel free to email us at education@savvydigital. That's education@savvy, S-A-V-I-I, digital.com. Again, thank you for tuning into us. We know that you have a large number of choices when it comes to listening to podcasts. So when you tune into us, it means the world. So please be safe. Take care. And goodbye for now.